free instead of monopolistic capitalism. Al, so great to have you here, sir. How are you?
Even good to be with you as always.
Well, my God, you've been busy, I imagine, with the volatility and craziness of this market. You called a long time ago to keep your eye on the housing bubble.
Indeed, I did, and the bubble, as we know now, is having is bleeding air, and will continue to do so for all of 08 and into 09, certainly.
Now, let me ask you this: isn't this, what is a bubble? Is this something of a manufactured condition that meets the?
All speculative bubbles are manufactured.
Okay.
They are manufactured. The grist, the propellant of all speculative bubbles is increased capital liquidity, meaning increased availability of capital and lower interest rates. That is the absolute grist upon which speculative bubbles are formed.
Now, is this also a view? Is this also the fake reality of the so-called American dream? Because we do not have manufacturing here, people can't afford houses because supply and demand, but yet the demand can't afford the supply. So then they create these instruments that allow people to get in over their heads and help create this bubble. Is this just real estate and loan brokers trying to make a buck in an America that is being bankrupted?
Oh, sure it is. I mean, the Bush-Cheney regime, you add the third element necessary to create a speculative bubble, and that is a lax regulatory environment. And here we are. And, part and parcel of the problem is that the median price of a home in the United States, under the 7-year tenure of this regime, doubled at one point. And that, of course, a record increase in the value of a home. And we also saw, because of a lax regulatory environment and declining interest rates, a Fed that was very accommodative, as we now find out, too accommodative, meaning that they kept rates too low for too long, thus exaggerating the speculative bubble in real estate, is that we saw millions of people suddenly had the ability to buy homes that should not have been buyers. But it was politically popular to say that, particularly for the Republicans. This was largely a Republican idea to be able to say, particularly to minorities, that you too can have part of the American dream. And, of course, they knew that would-be buyers within the group that they were loosening regulations to accommodate didn't understand what a negatively amortized mortgage was with a triple balloon at the end.
And so at the end of this, at the end of these bubbles like that of the tech bubble and then this housing bubble, for those that created this environment, what did they gain?
What they gain is an enormous amount of wealth that was generated on rising property values, principally wealth created by speculators. And now you create wealth on the other side, this is where real Republican wealth has been created, by being short the instruments, that is the packaged mortgages, what you hear the terms all the time. Most people don't understand what they mean. CMOs, CDOs, collateralized debt obligations within various risk tiers, instruments that have virtually collapsed in value, particularly in the lower tiers, and have dramatically affected some of the largest of the nation's financial institutions.
Now, these CDOs, as I understand it, people will go out there, these lenders would go out there, and I don't know how these lenders were able to get mortgages to these folks when the banks are the ones that, actually are vulnerable to this. Why did the banks let some of these loan applications go through?
Because banks are no longer the major provider in this country anymore of mortgage capital. Private investment now or private investment pools combined with GSEs or government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie, Freddie, etc., and the guarantees that they give out are now the large source of capital. It isn't the banks that are the principal providers of mortgage capital like they once were. Consequently, you haven't seen that many large banks hurt. Wells Fargo, Washington Mutual, Wachovia, State Street, but only a handful of them. The institutions that have been hurt are the nation's brokerage firms, Goldman Sachs, Morgan, Merrill Lynch, etc., that had large inventories of the CDO paper that they were carrying on their books at artificially high prices.
Right. How is it that we have the supply and demand equation for housing plus, population where the majority of people cannot buy the houses? Doesn't that throw that little balance out of balance?
But no, that's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, we have in the United States the highest of the G20 nation states. We have the highest percentage of the population that own homes and can actually afford to buy them. Remember, in most countries, particularly in Western Europe, the percentage of home ownership is substantially lower than it is in the United States.
And why is that?
Because prices are substantially higher. Residential real estate prices in Western Europe are substantially higher relative to wage income than is the same fraction in the United States.
But how come economics doesn't factor in a person's ability to pay and keep prices, at a rate where...
Well, therein comes a loosened regulatory environment where so many mortgage applications were approved without, as they say, without disclosure, without income verification, or without any type of credit check or disclosure, and these types of mortgages, which constitute the bulk of subprime paper, were literally written like bubble gum. And they inspired an enormous new industry of fraud within the real estate business, particularly fraudulent appraisals.
Yes. So they appraise the houses up.
They as we are now discovering, appraisals were made for substantially more than what the property was worth. But people should have known, even if you were a potential subprime buyer that doesn't understand anything about mortgages or financing, that to walk into a home to be able to borrow 125% of its supposed value with no money down on a double negatively amortized mortgage with balloons at the end of it, so that you actually walked out of the door with money in your pocket up front, there was something wrong with
that. Yeah. You were probably feeling like, whoa, I really got over on something. And, it came over you.
I mean, what the advantage, there has been advantages for many. It has allowed, particularly in the Tier 1 property, which is, by the way, the second highest default rate comes in the Tier 1 property. That's property with value of $3 million or more. Because so many wealthy Republicans that are expatriating have overfinanced the homes and just walk away from them.
Wow. Around 3 million, because what you hear in the news, it just, conjures up, poor folk, of course, out there overextending themselves.
No, that's not true at all. On a percentage basis, the default ratio within the prime, so-called prime mortgage category has risen as much as has subprime on a percentage basis, just that it started from such a low number, and is still rather low compared to subprime default, overall subprime default numbers. But that is where the real defaults lie, is in property at the current median value, $217,000 or less, and property at $3 million or more.
Okay. Now, we have this, coupled with oil prices. What do you see going on in the world of oil?
Oil has become, I think, more of a contrived market than probably it ever has been before. By that, I mean that oil as a fungible commodity, its current price does not support the underlying supply-demand equation. If gold were actually traded based on its underlying supply-demand equation, the price of a barrel of oil would be $70, not $95. Mm-hmm. And it is true that the speculative demand for oil now, or speculative trading of oil, this is particularly in the United States, and the NYMEX oil contracts, which have become a speculator's market and have divorced themselves from supply-demand reality, that there is this inexorable effort to push the price of oil higher. and the Bush-Cheney regime has done everything possible in its political and economic policies to increase the price of oil and to increase the profit margin of refiners, to diminish domestic production as much as possible in order to drive prices higher. As we remember George Bush Sr. saying about Bushonomics, that nothing consolidates wealth like higher oil prices, and he's right.
But also, this money obviously is getting into the hands of people that are supposedly our enemies, like Russia, like the Middle East, and that money is going to people that are out there killing Americans for whatever reason.
It has, but that higher oil prices have not substantially increased any of our enemies' capabilities to harm us. Iran is a classic example. Even though at Dramek, oil prices having quintupled in 5 years, and yet Iran, the Iranian government, still runs an enormous budget deficit.
What are they spending it on?
The problem was, what people by and large don't realize who are outside of the economic world, is that the finances of most of the Arab countries had effectively collapsed prior to the run-up in oil prices. They were so deeply in debt on a per capita basis, and so much of their income depended on oil, and they had so mortgaged, this is particularly true with Iran, they had so mortgaged its future that the dramatic increase in the price of oil has not led to a surge in usable after-debt service revenue to the Arab countries.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the countries that have, the one country you can say that has, from a fiscal standpoint, that has benefited the greatest has been Russia.
Yes. Do you have any concerns about seeing Putin with all of this new power and resources?
No, because they have not, as one would think traditionally of a Russian government, Putin is pragmatic enough not to simply squander the money on increased military expenditures. That's something that Bushes do. You notice Russia doesn't do that anymore. Russia has wisely, taken its oil, or used its increased oil revenues to pay down Russian state debt. Indeed, Russia will be, by 2011, Russia will be the first of the G8 nation states to be out of debt. As a matter of fact, it will probably be the only G8 nation state to ever be out of debt.
But that could be changed by somebody turning on the spigot, or new oil fields coming on and depressing the price a gallon, right?
Well, it could be, but Russia's the export value of Russia's metals and minerals, timbers, fibers, etc., agricultural product, all of which Russia is a net exporter of. We're talking about items, metals, minerals that have already tripled or quadrupled in value in the last 5 years.
Right. Commodity prices.
But Russia is actually doing everything right. It's paying down its debt. It will be out of debt within a very few years. It is aggressively now attempting to modernize its infrastructure. It is liberalizing its investment rules, allowing more money into the country now than they did before. And Russia, I would, as I've written on almartinraw.com before, what is changing? What has Bushonomics created? What is it ensured? What it is ensured is that Russia and China are now the two rising empires, whilst America is the empire in decline.
Yes. On the lines, Al Martin from Al Martin Raw. And your other website, sir, I forgot, is it
almartinraw.com, which is a little more politically oriented, and Insider Intelligence.
That's what it is. Insider Intelligence.
Which is, that is exclusively for traders, really.
Yes.
We run a print service with weekly recommendations along with our ever popular day trading service, which is really what we're all about.
Right.
And you'll see the recommendations we make every week and what we ourselves traded. during the week.
That is Al Martin. He is with us in the second hour of Radio Alchemy. Please go to these websites. There are cross links between them. We have him here because we need to, and I want you all to really get clear about capital and money, why the right has it and the left has left it, and why the left needs to pick it up and pick it up quick. This is KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara. We'll be back with Al in just a second.
Radio Alchemy. Eclipsing conventional wisdom. All alchemists converge at www.radioalchemy.com for streaming audio and more.
And do remember, loves, to go to www.kpfk.org. There you can go to programs, find the Something's Happening program guide, skip on down to Wednesday night, Thursday morning, 2 to 4, boom. There's Radio Alchemy, link there. Come onto the website. We're going to really kick it up into gear, get some goodies out there. And so so much great stuff going on. Having you guys know about the North American Union, having you look at such candidates as Ron Paul, Barack Obama, folks such as that that are out there that possibly might have the heart and maybe the momentum in mind to do something good. Well, certainly Ron Paul has his finger on the pulse in talking about monetary policy and the collapse of the dollar and printing money out of thin air. It's amazing to see all the rest of his types, Republican runners up there, just like snickering at him, like, what's he talking about, crazy old fool? And he is the smartest man up there. On the lines, Al Martin. Al, let me ask you a little bit about that. What do you think about the Democratic and Republican fields out there overall for the economy?
It makes no difference.
Okay.
Those who believe that a regime change or any particular regime can save the day, we are beyond that point. As the Comptroller General of the United States, David Walker, the only man in Washington that tells the truth. I'm surprised he's still alive, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But as he has pointed out, the aggregate consequences of Bushonomics 1 and 2, Bushonomics 1 now being defined by the General Accounting Office, as a matter of fact, as that form of economics practice from 1984 to 1992, and again from 2001 to present. Bushonomics 1 and Bushonomics 2 combined have created $20 trillion of national debt. And what this has done is to ensure that any future regime will have extremely limited flexibility in terms of whatever economic policies they may want to proffer.
Yeah, but if Russia can do it, why can't we? I mean, we probably...
Because we are Bushonomics has now ensured that we have of all the G20, that's the 20 largest industrial economic states, or the so-called 21st world nation states, what Bushonomics has ensured is that we have the highest per capita debt of any nation. And the problem with the United States, the main difference between the United States and Russia, is the United States is not a resource-rich nation. We are a net importer of those resources.
Okay. We do have oil, though.
The United States can only produce at the very most 8 million barrels a day. You see that we're not even producing that. We're producing less than 6 million barrels a day because the Bush-Cheney regime has done everything possible to retard domestic oil production in order to increase prices. But the United States, in terms of its hydrocarbon usage, can only produce at the very most 1/3 of what it consumes.
Yes.
We will be a hydrocarbon importing nation forever.
Okay. Talk a little bit about, so we've seen Citigroup get really nailed by the these collateralized debt instruments, et cetera, CEOs being lopped off and everything. And here they do, and they get a cash infusion. I think they got it from the sovereign funds out of Dubai or something like this. And then,
Merrill Lynch just went to Singapore for money.
Right.
And those have become the saviors. It is the various nations' so-called sovereign wealth funds, which are nothing more than government pools of money
Right.
that have been built up by exporting something that has risen in value. Those monies are now being used by said governments to purchase U.S. assets cheaply. Something I've talked about on AlMartinRaw.com, something we've talked about on your show.
Right.
5 years ago, when I said that ultimately you will find those who export commodities and build wealth, sovereign wealth funds, will use those to come in and buy out the United States at 10 cents on the dollar. Well, they're buying out U.S. real estate packages, paper at 30 cents on the dollar now.
So there is no such thing as a free market. I mean, what the heck are we dealing with here? I mean, this isn't like free market capitalism. I mean,
it's free market. Yes, it is. It is free market capitalism, but with a Bushonian twist.
But wouldn't we, if it were free market, wouldn't we let Citibank collapse?
Of course. And the moderate Republicans, the true fiscally conservative Republicans, Grassley, Snow, Brownback, etc., the true fiscally conservative Republicans who are classified as moderates politically are right, and that is we should simply let these institutions collapse. But that would be counter to the mandate of Bushonomics, i.e. the continuous consolidation of wealth and power into ever higher, tighter, end quote, righter, close quote, hands, as George Bush Sr. himself said.
So the money
The whole idea of creating speculative bubbles under a Bushonian regimes is to consolidate power, consolidate wealth, to allow those bubbles to collapse, to allow assets to be purchased by others for a fraction on the dollar.
And they just happen to be their friends, I guess, that allow
Of course. You know, I've noted on AlMartinRaw.com before that the principal buyers now of defaulted equity asset packages or paper in the United States are comprised of 30 deep offshore limited partnerships, all managed by Carlyle. And what we find, even in the sovereign funds, particularly in the Dubai sovereign funds, you see consistently the same 300 names involved, and they're all Americans. Mm-hmm. And they are the top 300 members of the cabal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We see an inordinate amount of wealth being consolidated right within the top 0.1% of the nation.
Do you think that any president could come in then and change the tax structure so these offshore tax shelters get repatriated?
You know, that's not doable anymore because Bushonomics has precluded that ability. What Bushonomics has done is to ensure that the United States will become increasingly dependent on bailouts from other people's money that the American people have created wearing their hats as consumers.
Yes. By shipping our money off campus, sending it, the goods coming from China.
It all fits hand in glove. If you can get your mind around a much bigger picture.
Right.
What Bushonomics is all about, which is the systematic dismantling of the United States and the transfer of sovereignty into the hands of 30 or 40 entities.
And they have that sovereignty because they own the assets, and they own the.
But you create the wealth. We do the same thing, just on a smaller scale in InsiderIntelligence.com.
Right.
Anyone that does what we do, and that is trade something, buy and sell something for a living, in this case securities or commodity futures or whatever, is essentially doing the same thing. And that is accruing a pool of capital to protect oneself from the consequences of Bushonomics A, or if you are doing it on a very large level, you are doing it to exploit the consequences of Bushonomics. First, create the speculative bubble, make money on the way up, you then short the asset packages created on the way down, which means you've taken in money from both sides of the same trade. You then ultimately use that money to purchase the underlying asset for pennies on the dollar.
Oh my God!
That's what Bushonomics is all about.
And so, you know what I don't understand is how can this little sawed-off type stand there and say our economy is strong, it's resilient? What, like when we sit back and watch CNBC, Wall Street and all this stuff, and they're like, saying, oh, we're not going to have a recession, oh, well, maybe we might have something light, but we're resilient and all that. What are they doing? Are they just lying?
Of course. You hear every day on CNBC and Bloomberg, the financial media, the same old bullish, endlessly bullish diatribe that Joe Sixpack America has been sold on all their lives. That, oh, don't worry about the declines because the value of securities always rise over time, which is not true, by the way.
Right.
And don't worry about declining consumption or increased debt because asset prices will always, or the value of asset prices will always be greater than the net depreciation value on the currency resulting from these policies, which is also a lie. But these are the lies that Joe Sixpack America, I call him Joe Sixpack 300 share buyer, is in the market every single day. They are the grist. They are the backbone.
And they're packaged, packaged and brought by these.
You need this underlying base of support in the securities markets to allow the big money players to sell short.
Okay, very good. Very good. It's like the population provides the liquidity, right?
The hoi polloi provides the liquidity as it should. And what has been the consequence of Bushonomics too? I mean, the statistics are absolutely astounding. The top 1% of the nation now controls more than 70% of all of the private wealth. Yet no other nation state in the last 2,000 years has reached such a fraction. The so-called Malthusian income dispersion index, they used to call it at Malthus's time the 263X, because what Malthus pointed out is that in every nation state on the planet in the last 2,000 years, when the aggregate income of the top 10% of that nation exceeded the aggregate income of the bottom 10% by a factor of 263 times, revolution and collapse ensued. In the United States, the Malthusian income dispersion index is now 338.
What?
That's a number that has never been reached before by any nation state.
Why? You know what? Why doesn't the American? What happened to the Malthusian prediction then in America?
Well, there is no single. I mean, the central premise of Thomas Malthus is that everything deteriorates over time, and that deterioration gradually accelerates. And the United States just happens to be in a period of forced economic decline, or that is, economic decline that would have happened anyway, but is being crafted and manipulated and regulated in order to ensure the maximum transfer of wealth from the hands of the many into the hands of the few.
Let's talk a little bit about gold, because I know that this is something that you have supported, letting people know that it's something to consider as a part of your portfolio. It closed at an all-time high today of like 881, something to that effect. Is it going to go higher than that? What do you think about gold?
Yes, gold will consistently move higher, but it is not going, as the gold bugs would have you to believe, gold is not going to $2,000 an ounce tomorrow. It will take some time. It will take time even for gold to reach $1,000 an ounce. The gold bugs, who I disagree with vehemently all the time, that try to tell you, well, gold should be $2,200 an ounce now, just inflation adjusted.
Right.
Of course, the fraction gold is a fungible, and the fraction of inflation adjustment doesn't apply because gold still has an underlying supply-demand equation. Gold is not simply a monetary metal like the gold bugs would have you believe.
Right.
The long and short of it is, however, gold is the asset of the future. It's what you want to own. It's what you want to accumulate. It's what you want to do every day. Buy it every day, the way we do. When we, at the end of every day, we have our day trading profits swept into a gold ETF.
Right, right.
Ultimately, however, and as I have warned, the Bushonian regime is becoming increasingly confiscatory towards gold. We see every year the regime moves a little closer to a gold confiscation. It trims around the edges of gold ownership or protection of individual gold or physical gold ownership in this country. Now, right now, you don't have to be concerned, but 3 years, 5 years from now, you do not want to be a U.S. citizen, principally domiciled in the United States, holding physical gold in the United States.
But then they just come out with a new gold coin.
Well, the regime encourages you to do just that. That is, to hold gold bullion But gold bullion, physical gold bullion in the United States, is a very dispersed mechanism. That is, it's held by people that know very little about what the regime is doing in terms of curbing citizens' rights to own, transport, trade gold on a non-declared basis, for instance. And one of the reasons the regime does not widely publicize the fact that it is becoming increasingly confiscatory is because it wants a stable supply of gold in this country. It would be probably 110, 120 million ounces that would be readily confiscatable.
And what would they do with it once they got it?
What would they do once they would get it? Would go same thing they did in May of 1933. It would go back into the U.S. Treasury.
Oh, geez. Okay. And so at this point, it's at 881. Did people miss out? Is it too late for people to start?
I don't, even I can't, if you're just an accumulator of the metal, if you're using revenue that you're making from some other source, then it literally doesn't make any difference where you buy it. I look at it a little differently because we trade it every day.
Okay, you trade gold.
I am much more interested in what gold is going to do in the next 5 minutes than what it's going to do in the next 5 months.
Okay, very good. Okay, very good.
And I can tell you, as right now, gold is overbought in here, and is certainly due for a pullback.
Really, it's overbought.
Yeah,
but its relation to the dollar. Right? Isn't that why it's?
Well, but if you look, the dollar has actually rallied in the last 10 sessions, whilst gold has continued to rally at the same time. This is an unusual phenomenon. That's because there's been a lot of unwashed Joe Six-Pack money coming into the gold futures. But you saw today when the price rose above $890, you did see a lot of professional short selling in the gold today for the first time in really a month or so. And I think you'll see gold pull back to 840, 850, something like that.
And then what do you think it will take for it to start its rally up again? Like some kind of attack?
Market thing. You need to get the unwashed, the Joe Six-Packers, those that came in with their $10,000 accounts at their local firm because they saw something on a commodity infomercial or something. You need those people to get burned out and then come back in again.
Yes.
That's what they're there for.
Right. Here they come. Would you say you mentioned going into ETFs? Do you like that over buying the gold as bullion?
I do. Well, physical bullion. The only people in this country that hold bullion are small owners of bullion. People that own 20, maybe 21 ounce gold eagles or something like that. Those that have ownership in gold in large amounts do not hold it physically. It's cumbersome for one thing. It's not easily traded that way. People that own gold are sold on this idea that ultimately things are going to fall apart to the point where it's going to become actual money of last resort. Yes, there is an economic collapse coming, a global economic collapse coming. That does not mean, however, that nation states are going to fall apart. No, everything will still work. It just will work at a reduced level, but governments will be held together. Paper currencies are still going to exist. The reason why the United States and frankly some other countries now are even long-held democracies are becoming less friendly towards gold is they don't want citizens holding a lot of physical gold that would compete against an ever softer paper currency in the future.
But so that really sounds like it's good to be in it then, overall.
But see, you're making the presumption. The only people that I think should hold physical gold that can only afford to buy a small amount of it, or only can buy a small amount of it regularly, are likely to be those people still left in the United States in 10 years' time, when the deterioration has happened in earnest, and when the regime then in power will be a dictatorship. When there will have been 1 billion more square feet of self and domestic political detention facility construction built. Those who buy gold, who trade gold, to look at it the way I do, are those that are ultimately either have expatriated from the United States or will expatriate from the United States.
On the lines, Al Martin of Al Martin Raw and InsiderIntelligence.com. Both of those sites, links between both of them. Some of them give a more political, economic perspective, and one is full on trading, talking about what we are picking Great Al's mind about, which is Bushonomics, the man who has brought that term and keeps it coming, because that's what we are living amongst right now in all of its horrific glory. And so we just need to know and understand what we are seeing in front of our eyes. This is KPFK, 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara. We'll be back with Al after this short break.
Future.
Where the past and the future converge.
Future.
Go to www.radioalchemy.com. RadioAlchemy.com for streaming audio
Future.
and more.
Future.
On the lines, Al Martin of Al Martin Raw and InsiderIntelligence.com. And oh, by the way, getting to Radio Alchemy, go to kpfk.org. There you'll see all the rest of our amazing programming, events that are going on in Los Angeles and beyond, people of like mind. And when you see them, tell them that you stay up late listening to Radio Alchemy and something's happening with Royal Hollywood, and to get into the zone of money. Start reading, investing, getting to know about it, reading about expatriation. Lots of great stuff about that. EscapeArtist.com. Really great stuff that we brought you here overnight. They actually had a book from this last fund drive called Getting Out of America. That gives you all the resources and considerations that you have to make a choice. Because if we sit here and constantly talk about, oh, well, look at Germany and look what Germany did. Didn't they see what was going on when Hitler was there? Well, hello. Do you see what's going on with Bush here right now? And what Al is saying, which is they have screwed this place so bad that our next administration is just going to be choking on it. And so, Al, if it is that our next administration isn't going to be doing any, isn't going to be able to turn the ship around, what is it? People, do you see the U.S. never coming back into its zenith that it had, say, in the, when was the zenith? When were we really cool? 70s?
The United States was at its peak of political and financial power in the mid-1950s.
Okay.
We have declined really ever since, and we'll continue to decline as we were meant to decline due to the political decisions undertaken in this nation in the post-war regime. Most of what you talk about Malthus, indeed Malthusian theorem about overpopulation. Remember what Malthus said: we're the only animal that has the ability to control our population growth, but we refuse to do so.
Right.
That is the central crux of it. I wrote a long treatise on Al Martin Raw about this. When all nation states, I'll put it, give you a thumbnail, when all nation states in the immediate post-war regime in the late 40s made decisions not to attempt to control population growth, it became necessary to convert the planet's economy from a savings-generated economy, which it had been prior to the war, to now a consumption-based economy to accommodate burgeoning populations, to provide jobs, in other words.
Right.
However, when in doing this and the diminishment of resources that it has caused to support this endless accrual of new citizens, along with the endless increase in governmental debt and corporate debt that has had to have been inured at the same time, you throw into that mix citizens' debt, the debt of all individuals in the nation, for instance, which is now at a record high, necessary to support an economy where 70% of the GDP is consumption. There is an end to that game, and we are now at the end of that game, where consumption there cannot simply be enough what's called positively financed consumption to keep GDP growing. What the Bush-Cheney regime has tried to do is to fill in the gap with ever greater issuance of government debt.
Right.
Even that, however, can only last so long. As the Comptroller General of the United States pointed out, the United States will begin to lose the ability to service its debt after 2009. And it is entirely possible that by 2014 or 2015, it's not that far away,
right,
that the United States may indeed, and I believe this is probably going to be the case, will be the first of the big nation states, the first of the so-called G20 nation states, to have to declare force majeure on its debt service. That is, to declare that it no longer has the ability to service its debt. In which case, the collapse would begin in earnest. The United States would collapse immediately. The rest of the world would collapse 5 days later.
Even though Russia and China are set up to be the next big ones, how come they wouldn't, in a sense, bail out the world economy? They aren't.
They don't have any vested interest to do so, because the United States, you cannot mount. There is no other country or combination of countries, even Russia or China could not do it, to mount a conventional bailout of the United States, i.e. to keep the United States in business as it has always been in business, the way that the United States has bailed out smaller nation states in the past.
But if our debt, if our total debt is $70 trillion, isn't there that amount of monies out there to, I mean, that's with consumer debt. So if it's
the problem is that the amount of, yes, the money still exists because money is a zero-sum game. It just changes hands, and therein lies the rub, is that so much of that public debt has been converted into private wealth in the hands of very, very few citizens.
Okay. And their interest is not, okay.
Their interest is not, the long and short of it is even that those who make this country run, who have made the decision not to allow the country to stay in business, now have a vested financial interest to see the nation collapse because they are so heavily sold short domestic assets.
Let me ask you this. Speaking of them, people being able to buy U.S. assets for pennies on the dollar, is it true that the New York Stock Exchange was sold? Like the corporation that's behind the New York Stock Exchange?
Well, it is. I mean, the New York Stock Exchange just did what all the other exchanges have done and have become publicly traded entities and separated their regulatory function from their market functions. All of the nation's exchanges have done that.
But did some foreign entity buy a controlling amount of shares?
No. There's no foreign entity there are foreign entities, mostly Arab entities, that own large share blocks, but there is no foreign entity that has
a controlling,
de facto voting control of any publicly traded U.S. exchange.
Because I know the London Stock Exchange is going to be sold, right?
Well, the LSE has been packaged up. They've tried to package that into the German DAX to try to package the German and British stock markets together. That so far hasn't worked. Nobody's willing to pay a premium for European exchanges like they are U.S. exchanges.
And why would there even be a premium on? Is it because of the euro and the price of the euro?
No, it's because of the volume of transacted business is still principally concentrated on U.S. exchanges.
Right, absolutely. Finally, the hour, of course, has flown by, Al, as it always does with you. You had 5 points on your website that has to do with, from your insider intelligence, from intelligence health, financial, economic health. What were they?
Well, what we were talking about earlier is point number one is, and some of this has got to be self-realization for all citizens. If you're working for a wage, if you're a wage-earning citizen that understands nothing about money or markets, you're stuck here. And the best alternative you can have is learn how to pick carrots. I predict they will be the principal cash crop produced by civilian inmate labor facilities. Maybe you can get a choice position as a capo in the cell for something. But what everyone has to realize now is that who you vote for, we're beyond that. It doesn't make any difference. No regime can change the situation now. It comes down to yourself. And what you've got to do is generate money. However you do that. We do it by trading the markets. And that is classically the way wealth is accumulated in a capitalist society, is by trading, by buying and selling. The most classic capitalism, the absolute foundation of Smithsonian capitalism, is buying 1,000 shares of Universal Widget for $10 in the morning and selling it for $10.25 in the afternoon.
Yes.
That is the absolute basis of capitalism.
Right.
And what citizens have to realize is that now is the time they must make money. They must accumulate wealth. They've got to transfer that wealth into an asset that is sensitive correctly to paper currency such as gold. And you should be considering and lining yourself up for ultimate expatriation. And what people are finding out, particularly retirees and working class Republicans, who constitute the bulk of expatriations within the lower 50% of the economic strata, is that many nations now have instituted asset requirements that never existed before for expatriating U.S. citizens.
Oh, jeez.
Canada has done so. Mexico has done so.
Mexico? Who are they to do anything?
Mexico has significantly has added a asset requirement and has tightened expatriation for U.S. citizens. There's now a 1-year waiting list.
Well, that's
because
just
other countries don't. What other countries, particularly those on our borders, don't want is a large influx of bovobs, burned out victims of Bushonomics, streaming across their borders. The world of expatriation is changing. Middle class retirees that went to Mexico are now being pushed further south. I wrote an article about Al Martin Raw called Republican Regentrification, where you see working class Republicans in Mexico are being bought out by wealthy pro-Bush faction Republicans that are being forced further south into Guatemala and points south. Costa Rica has now become the new haven of choice for wealthy pro-Bush faction Republicans. 10% of the Costa Rican population are Republicans. And the number continues to grow.
So the 5 points, highlighting them, one is...
You must make money.
Okay, make money.
There is a short time frame. You have 5 years to 7 years at the very most.
Okay.
You have to make money.
Okay, number 2.
You have to convert that money into something that is adverse to paper currency, like gold.
Okay, very good.
Third, be prepared to expatriate from the United States. The first preparation you have to make now is to increase your net worth to the point that you can expatriate.
Exactly.
Because other countries don't want a lot of burned out bovobs in them, particularly Canada and Mexico.
Okay, and number 4?
Number 4, understand that this planet is going to be an increasingly bleak place to live on in the next decade. For most, but for a few, it's going to continue to be a very nice place to live.
Yeah.
And what you want to be is on the right side of that equation.
Yes.
And how you get on the right side of that equation is by making all the money you can now.
Now, okay. And number 4.
Converting that money into something that is going to be worth more relative to the value of paper currencies in the future.
Okay, and number 5?
Number 5, understand that it's all down to you. This is something the naive left doesn't understand. There's nothing you can do in your capacity as a voter. No regime's going to change the situation. We are, as the Comptroller General said, beyond the point of no return. Don't look to anyone. Don't look to government. Don't ever expect necessarily that your Social Security payments are going to be worth much of anything. Prepare yourself for the future, a future where you are going to have to be increasingly self-reliant as government services, as that which government provides to the people continuously diminishes.
Al, that is absolutely right on, considering we have Schwarzenegger, who just came out and said we're $14 billion in the hole. When he came in, we were only 4.
Yeah, and his great plan of bailing out California. The only thing Schwarzenegger did was to take California's $38 billion in debt and refinance it. It didn't take a genius to do that. All he did was roll over most of the debt and make the problem. He did what most people have done in California, most governors, and ensure that what governors of California have consistently done now for the last 20 years is to build a debt time bomb for the state.
Yes. And that's what we got.
That's going to explode in the future.
Well, Al, darling, I know you have to get back to the market for yourself. I really want to thank you so much. As always, Al, want to have you on more and more in 2008 so that you could come in and rattle the cages of our listeners out here and of the left to get smart and stop daydreaming about a white knight or somebody coming in that could change this. Like you said, it's up to individuals now. And I just thank you so much for your reality check and for what you're doing.
All right, even. As always, like Ollie North used to tell me, my old cohort Ollie, don't shred any documents I wouldn't.
All right, darling. Have a great trading night, and thank you again for everything you do, Al.
Good to be with you, even.
Thank you, sir. Hey, Al's websites, Al Martin Raw and Insider Intelligence are there for you. This is what it's all about. You, post-information age, you have the responsibility to look at it, to know it, and to see what you can do. You have that power. Clear out all of your fears and barricades and get busy. All right, darlings, until next week.
You've been listening to Radio Alchemy with your host, Evan Ray. Be sure to visit our website, www.radioalchemy.com, and join us next week for more mind-blowing revelations from the Friend.